I'm Samita, the founder of afineparent.com and your host here at the Positive Parenting Conference. Today, I have with me the one and only Roma Khetarpal. Roma is an educator, an author, a sought-after speaker, and a parentologist. Through her company, Tools of Growth, she provides groundbreaking workshops for parents and school staff caring for children. You won't believe it by looking at her, but she has 2 grown-up children who were the first little guinea pigs for her parentology experiments. And she's been at this for more than 2 decades. Today, we're going to talk to Roma about her book, The Perfect Parent, 5 Tools for Using Your Inner Perfection to Connect with Your Kids. I have to be honest with you, when I read this book, I had so many aha moments. I didn't know what to focus on this talk on. It took me a while to come down to one topic. And so I'm really excited to get this started. Welcome to the conference, Roma. I'm so happy you could join us.
Hi, Samita. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor. I love the work that you do. So it's really great to connect personally, finally, right?
Yes, awesome. So let's jump right in. Your book, The Perfect Parent, right out of the gate, it flips this idea of what perfection means and the way most of us normally see it on its head. And you have this really beautiful perspective of what perfection means. Can you talk to us a little about that?
Sure. And I think, in raising my kids, this was the one thing, being a perfectionist myself in the past, and I think still in recovery, I should say, this constant, this nudge to do everything right, to get everything right, to get it all done. I think that's what I found the most taxing part of parenting. And even as I ran through workshops, with parents, that chase to perfection, that ideal, I want to get this all right was so strong and detrimental.
Yes.
So this is what I decided needs to be shattered because, as I say in the book, if I were to line up on your worst parenting day, if I were to line up a bunch of children and say, go ahead, parent, pick a different one, we would still pick our own. And vice versa, even on our children's worst day, if we asked them to pick a different parent, they would still pick us. So this natural bond, this natural coming together, this moment in time where these kids came into our lives, that is the perfection that we need to focus on. We have these children and they know us just as much as we know them. This bond of knowing each other is unmatched. So really, that is the only perfection that we need to embrace and own. And now when we do that, that becomes a platform for growth, a platform for learning.
I love that. So we're bringing our inner perfection and that pre-existing bond with our kids, and we're acknowledging that, and we are saying, okay, you know what? In the day-to-day, minute-to-minute decisions, we might not be living up to this external idea of perfection, but overall, this is good. We are fine. We are perfect. And take it forward, right?
And we're fully equipped. This is this internal perfection, this inner perfection, the qualities that, and we'll talk about the tools, I'm sure, as we move along, but we already have this in us. So really, then the big question becomes, how do we tap into it in the day-to-day? And that's where the PGS comes in. And you and I talked about that a little bit, through the talks that we've had. PGS is what I call the parental guidance system. So each one of us is fully equipped. And the 2 elements of this parental guidance system, the first one is parental instinct, which we all have naturally. Each one of us has that parental instinct. It's our fight or flight when our child falls, when we run to the rescue, if they're hurting, if they're ill, if they're in danger of any kind, safety issues. We all have that naturally. Now, what we struggle with is the communication tools. Because really, when you look at what bonds that relationship, what really secures the relationship between parent and child, it's communication. And if you look at the word communication, it's commune, the base word. How do we come together? How do we commune with our children? And communication doesn't necessarily mean having a one-way dialogue. It's how can we, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always right or you're always right, but how can we come together on it so that we can have a discussion about it? And those communication tools we need them constantly. We need to refresh ourselves, and those communication tools are what I offer. And the ones that I've picked are, what I like to advocate as being that resource that's already present within us, so that parents have this empowerment, knowing that what I need for my child is in me. So now, how do I extract my best and then invite their best to this communication platform?
I love that. I love that. And I love how you talk about PTS as, you use the metaphor of GPS. You say that it's kind of a guiding system. It's there. It's already in us. We just have to
dial in.
Exactly. Dial into it, learn to rely on our instincts, and bring out that, those tools that, some of them we may have to learn, some of them we already have. It's just be more intentional and aware about this. And this GPS, this parental GPS called PTS, will guide us into being really relaxed and enjoy our time with our kids. I just love that.
And that's the point, right? I mean, think about it, Sumita. This is, we're going to be parenting for the rest of our lives if we're lucky, right? And when you think about it, parenting is the most important job we'll ever do.
Right.
The longest job we'll ever do. And yes, oftentimes the hardest job we'll ever do. But do we really want to spend, the longest job we'll ever do in misery? Complaining in chaos and madness, and really sucking the joy out of it. And there's a way to do this. And it all circles back to that oneness, to that communication, to that shared space with our children.
I love that. I love that. And you identify 5 different tools, and I really, really, really wish we had time to go into all of them. But I think we can go into one of them into really depth. And the one that I want to focus here is the one you call sensible parenting. And so the basic idea of sensible parenting is to bring in all our senses and to really be present when we are with our kids, right?
Yes.
Except nobody really talks about this. Nobody really talks about how we can bring each one of our senses into a conversation and how it can really enhance that conversation. Can you talk to us a little about that?
Sure. Using our senses is what creates a complete experience. And everything in parenting is about connection, and that connection comes from a full experience, from a heartfelt experience. And when we synchronize our senses, or when we use our senses with each other, we're really harnessing the fullness that we will receive from that experience, which really leads into the connection, which leads into the relationship, which leads into having that bond with our children. So yes, using our senses, using our 5 senses. And fortunately enough, we can do it all simultaneously. So I'll let you, talk about what your favorite one is so that we can get the dialogue started.
Oh, I want to go into all 5 of them. I think we should be able to squeeze it in. But taking a step back, this language of senses, it may seem strange now, but it wasn't, right? I mean, we've all used this language of senses. We've relied on our senses more than our words at some point. It's just that as our kids grew older,
absolutely,
we've forgotten this.
Absolutely. If you think about the first year that we have our children, right? That first year is all sensory connection. When you hold your children, they stop crying. That's touch. When you make eye contact with them, that's your sight. When you really listen to their coos and their caws, and you make that connection, you use your voice, that's your verbal connection with them. So, and now there's so much science that talks about, this communication. Dr. Raul Vardagal talks about eye communication. Dr. Dacker Keltner at UC Berkeley, he at the Greater Good Science Center, he talks about this whole connection of, power of touch with our children. There's so much science behind this as well, is when we use our senses to connect with our kids in that first year, that sort of becomes our primary language. So if you think about it, our very first language. Each one of us, our very first language is that language of the senses. That's what's creating the experiences from moment to moment with our children. And then, of course, doomsday, words come in, right? When words come in, I tell you, everything changes. We forget our first language, and we inherently know how powerful it is. We know what happens when we hug someone. We know what happens when we use our words sensibly, if you will, right? We inherently know that. We know if we make eye contact with our children, how powerful that is, but we disconnect. We just disconnect our senses and we use our words. We're in the kitchen, cooking while we're talking to our children at the same time. They're asking a homework question. We're on the phone and we'll sort of make a quick, gesture to them. And that complete sensory experience is lost.
Right. And studies have also shown that the nonverbal communications, these other ways of communicating with our kids has a huge impact on the relationship as well, right? Mm-hmm. And linking a nonverbal communication with these 5 senses is a great way to remember to use these nonverbal communication. And on the other side of the spectrum, when we try to bring in all our senses, we are automatically more present in the moment. Absolutely. We are more mindful of who we are. Yes. So there's a ton of benefits to using this, right?
Absolutely. It makes us more mindful. We talk about mindful parenting. We talk about being present. We talk about conscious parenting. And what our senses do when we synchronize our senses, when we use our senses in communication, we become present, we become mindful, we become conscious. So literally mindful parenting is not something that you have to really, it's not a tool that you have to bring in. If you can use your senses, you're mindful. It makes you more aware of the connection with the child. And that awareness triggers a vibration. That vibration is a frequency that we connect with our children on at a very, at the innermost level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's look at each of these individually so we can see how we can be intentional about this.
Sure.
So let's start with sight. It's probably the most powerful, and yet we parents kind of squander this away. I mean, it's like when I was reading your book, that was the word that stuck with my head. It's like, we really do squander it away because we have our eyes on the screen, or like you said, we have our eyes on the stovetop, or, we are lost in thought and we are not even looking at our child's face when they're trying to tell us something. So sight is one of the most important ways that we can.
Most important. And I wish I could tell you that one is, out of the 5 senses, that one is more important than the other, because they're all equally important. But sight is that eye-to-eye connection, which really tells the children, I hear you, I see you, I acknowledge you, I understand you. And the response back in that eye-to-eye connection from our children is, I know you're there for me. I know I can trust you. So this is that eye connection language, if I was to put it in words, that the exchange that happens when my son was little. I'll give you a quick story. When my son was little, he was really upset at something, and we were trying to have a conversation with him. And he closed his eyes, just pulled them shut tightly, and sat in a corner. And I told him, I'm trying to talk to you, sweetheart. Why do you have your eyes closed? And he said, because if I keep my eyes closed, then we don't have to talk about it. So you see that sense of cutting things out, that eye language, that listening language. Children are able to communicate very openly. And remember that for us, that first sensory language of eye contact and being sensible, using our senses, sense-able, using our senses to connect with our children is far removed. We're at the age that we are. For children, it's still very active, because children at ages 4, 5, 6 still remember their primary sensory language. So really making that eye connection with them, making that eye contact when we speak to our children validates their presence. I see you, I acknowledge you.
I love that. And that helps build up their sense of self-esteem also, right? It's like indirectly, so we can do everything we want and we can say everything we want, but they need to feel deep within that I matter. And that eye to eye connection implicitly conveys that in a way that words easily can't, right?
Yes, so we think about this, right? When we're talking to our children about something and they're not paying attention, right? And they're looking away. What do? Oftentimes we direct their chin forward, right? And we say, look at me, I'm talking to you. Look at me, why are you looking away, right? So think of how invalidated we feel as parents. We pretty much tell them, you're disrespecting me, you're being rude. Why are you looking away? When they're greeting somebody socially, they don't make eye contact. We say, Grandma said hello to you. Look at Grandma and say hi. Don't just run around and say, hi, Grandma. She just walked in the door. So we're constantly reminding kids to do that. Now, the goal is to remember that in the day-to-day when we have those thousands of moments on a daily basis of connection with our kids, in the day-to-day chores, in the day-to-day direction that we're giving them. Sweetheart, you need to go finish your homework. Really making that eye contact with them. And many a times what works is if you even come down to their eye level. So they're not looking up at you and you're not looking down at them. Mm. It's really, bending down so that you can make that eye contact with them at their level. So you can connect with them at their level. This is a really powerful tool to make connections with children and to basically get what you want them to do, right?
Right. and on the flip side of that, eyes convey so much more than words, right? And that, I don't know, I mean, as my daughter's growing up, that's becoming very important, because there are times when I ask her, how are things? And she's like, it's good. Like, or when I'm picking her up from school and like, how was your day? And she's like, it's good. But I look at her face, I look at her eyes, I look at the, that light is missing. And that, that's my way of putting it. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody has that different connection with their child, where they look at the eyes, where they look at the face, and they know either something went really well or something didn't.
Right, you're 100% right. And think about the age-old saying, our eyes are the window to our
soul. Yes.
Because you connect deeply. When you look through the eyes, each one of us has our own light, our own presence. When we make that eye connection, we acknowledge each other in that light. We acknowledge each other in that presence. And that's what being aware or mindful or conscious is all about, is taking it in the moment. How can I make this child feel validated in the moment? How can I honor them in the moment?
Right. That's beautiful. So going forward, simple tips would be to pay attention to the child and look them in the eye, and learn slowly to identify their unique signature through their eyes, and then be open to showing your own self through your eyes, right? So that's how we would look at
them. If we don't make that eye contact with them, if we don't initiate it, this is not a habit that the kids will ever have.
Oh, that's good.
Initiate this. That is our responsibility. Otherwise we have kids that lose out that sensory communication as they get older into their own lives, into social skills, into connecting with their teachers, connecting with their peers, and then hence on into their relationships in the future, or at their jobs or their careers.
Awesome. So moving on, the next sense is hearing. And that is so important, right? Listening to our kids. Tell us about that.
Okay, so I'll start with a little story, with my son again. You see my son is the big guinea pig here, right? So my son now, he's, when I gave you that first story, he was 5. So now he's almost 16 when this happened. And I was on the webcast with Oprah and Eckhart Tolle. It was called A New Earth, right? It was the first webcast of its kind. 1 million of us were logged on worldwide. So it's really powerful. And they talked about active listening and listening word for word, and how, when we talk to people, we just don't listen. And I thought, I'm a really good listener. Mm-hmm. I'm very confident about that, because all my friends call me and they want to tell me these big stories and they want advice and all of that. So I'm a good listener. But then I thought, let me just observe it a little bit. And lo and behold, right, that same evening, my son walks in the door. He was almost 16 at the time. He had just started driving. And he came in and was really upset. And he said, I'm so upset. I can't believe this, and he had just driven. So of course, that's a little of a panic. I'm thinking, okay, you're so upset and you drove home, right? And I promised myself I was going to practice the active listening. I was going to listen from, word to word to word. So he started, and this is how his story went. He said, I was driving home and I was really upset, and I can't believe that, Jelani, who was a new boy on the team, gets to start on the next game. This is such a big game. I can't believe the coach. And so my brain is triggered because I want to say to him, I can't believe that. Why would the coach do that? Are you kidding me? Who decided that? Have you talked to him about it? But then, I satisfied that urge with because I realized that I needed to make some sound. And instead of words, what if it was an instinctual response? And when I started saying, I was able to calm myself down. I was able to get behind myself and let him tell me the story without interrupting. And there I was able to listen word for word for word. So this is how the story went. I'm really upset. I can't believe that he gets to start the game. And I was so upset. I wanted to talk to the coach about it. And as my day went along, I got more and more mad. And you know what? I think I'm going to go talk to the coach about it tomorrow. But really. But you know what, Mom? What's going to be the benefit of me talking to the coach? I mean, let's think about this for a minute. So if I talk to the coach, he probably won't change his decision anyways. He must have thought this through. And what's that going to do? It's going to ruin my mood. I'm the captain of the team. It's going to affect my team. And no, this is not a really good idea. Really? Okay. This is not a really good idea. You know what? I tell you what, I'm just going to go out there on Saturday and do the best that I can from the sidelines so that my team's morale doesn't get ruined and I don't shake off our team camaraderie. The point is to win the game, and I'm a good sportsman. Okay, yeah, you're right. Good point. Yeah. Okay, I get it. This is good. All right, thanks, Mom. He walks away and he turns around. He's at the corner of the steps, and I'll never forget this moment. And he says, "Thank you so much for helping me, Mom. That really helped. Thank you so much. I love you." And he comes back, he gives me a hug and a kiss and says, "You're the best mom in the world."
Oh,
Walks away. And he said, "Thank you so much for helping me," when really I didn't do anything. He did this on his own. All I did was allowed him to walk through his thoughts to come to resolution. So he went from anger to being calmer, being able to think rationally. In my book, I talk about the 3 tools of inner communication and outer communication as well: thoughts, feelings, and expressions. So he went back inwards, right? And he managed his intellect. Through his intellect, he also managed his emotions, whichever comes first, right? And then he went on to coming up with this resolution, which I thought about it. Had I jumped in, which would have taken a lot longer, number one, right? Had I jumped in, would I have guided him any differently? It's exactly how I would have guided him. So he did it on his own, and there was so much power in that. And I immediately, started using this tool more and more, and it ended up in my book, of course, and parents love it. It's so important for letting our children, so important to let our children finish their sentences, complete their thoughts, play out their emotions. Because emotions, if they're not played out, if they're interrupted, if we stall that emotional outburst and say, "You don't need to feel like that," or whatever we might jump in doing, we're actually stuffing it down. So letting them really use their emotional, intellectual, the waves that are going through to get to resolution, there's nothing more powerful than that.
Awesome. So I sort of hear you and I understand that. But I also know that as a parent, in general, listening is not as easy as it sounds, right? And as a parent, it could be even harder in some sense because we have this instinctive thing to jump in and solve it for them. But unless we take that step back, our kids will not learn how to sort things out for themselves.
Exactly. So now this builds resilience, self-reliance, and then, of course, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-respect, self-love, really being able to harness and make your own decisions. Sumita, we talk about, raising independent children. We want our children to be independent. Look at the base word, independent. What does that mean? Dependent upon themselves.
Oh, I
So
like that.
we want them to be independent, and yet we're jumping in, we're giving them resolution, we're cutting them off. So we're not building their interdependence, their dependence on themselves, their inner dependence, not inter, but their inner dependence. So as we let them resolve issues, as we let them walk through this, we're building that self-resilience and that self-reliance in our children.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So this is okay. So we've looked at one side of it where our kids are opening up and they're talking to us, in which case we have to listen. But what about those situations when the conversation is not happening from their end? How can we get those conversations started? How can we get them to start talking to us so we may listen to them?
Okay, give me an example.
Something's happening in my daughter's school, and I know that she's bothered about it, but she is not talking about it, and I don't want to poke. I don't want to ask her, so what's going on? So what might be a good way to bring this out so I can listen to her and, give her my support without being there on her case, trying to poke it and tease it out?
Sure. So I have a tool called Take 5, which means take 5 minutes a day to connect with your children, doing nothing. No thing. Absolutely nothing. Now, this can be done consciously as a habit where every day you take 5 minutes to build that relationship with the child, to sit out somewhere in nature, whether it's at a window or you're sitting in your patio or you're sitting in your backyard or, just wherever you might be, just taking that 5 minutes to do nothing. That creates that space of that camaraderie, that connection between parent and child. So how you can use sensible parenting is, if you're having trouble connecting with your daughter, is instead of poking at the issue, obviously we can tell, right? This is, again, that non-sensory communication, that something is wrong. Mm-hmm. And you want to invite them. There's a difference between instigating a conversation and actually inviting them to participate in a conversation. Right. And the way that could be done is to use this Take 5 is, so you know what, let's go hang out for 5 minutes in the backyard. I'm just going to sit here, or go there first and then call at them and say, Natasha, and my daughter's name is Natasha. Natasha, honey, you want to come hang out with me for a little bit? Look at this. Look how beautiful it is outside. And bringing that, I've had a long day. I just need to sit here. It really helps me think, bringing them into it and just hanging out and really not saying anything, committing not to say anything for a few minutes. And once you start to share that space with them, that feeling of the shared space starts to build a connection. And then you can start the conversation and say, Natasha, I really see you down today. And I'm here for you, sweetheart. Is there anything that you want to talk to me about? And make that eye contact with them. Come in front of them wherever they're sitting. Bend on one knee, hold their hand, whatever you need to do, make that eye contact with them and tell them, I'm here for you if you need to talk about anything.
That's awesome. Awesome. So what about, so I'm guessing that in some cases, so I like this, I really like this Take 5 tool. So I'm kind of detouring a little out here because I want to talk more about it. So with the Take 5, how quickly do you see kids talking? Because I don't think it's going to be standard for all children, right? Some children will probably open up.
The child is, the quicker the response, right? So the younger the children are, the more used to they get, the more used to the shared space that they get, right? So if you start at early ages, obviously in your case, your child is not young. And of course, it's a little harder with older children. In fact, I'll give you an example. When I started this, when I was teaching one of my workshops here locally in my city, one of the moms said, my daughter's 12. I don't know if she's going to do this. And I told her, I said, well, try it. You're going to do this every day. Just tell her we're going to sit down, hang out together for 5 minutes a day and do nothing. And so, of course, the first question that the older kids asked, and it's so funny because they're not used to doing nothing just as much as we are not used to doing nothing. We are defined by the things that we do, right? So the first thing that older children say, and in this particular case, Sarah, that she was 12 years old, she said, okay, that's really weird. What are we going to do? Okay, is this like a new thing that you've learned? We've never done this before. And she said straight up, she said, yes, I went to, at the parenting workshop that I'm taking, I'm taught that if we learn to sit together for 5 minutes a day, A, we get to relax and do nothing, which I'm so looking forward to because I don't even know if I know how to do that.
Uh-huh.
And B, we get to hang out together just with nothing. Think about it, Sarah. I'm not going to tell you what to do, where to do, what to pick up, no lunch, what's your homework, what's going on, nothing. We're just going to sit in silence. And she said, okay, well, that's kind of boring. She said, let's be boring for a little bit. Let's see, you got to help me out here. I've got to try this. I'm going back to class on Monday. I got to try this. I've got to give some kind of response. So they giggled about it. See, with older kids, parenting is all about being creative, right?
Uh-huh.
We talk about this in approachable parenting. How can we be approachable to our children? And we've sort of veered off a little bit, but you have to get creative. You have to connect with your kids at their age, right? So whatever their age is. And once that conversation started, I have to tell you, by the second day when Jean and Sarah sat together, the conversation that they had about puberty, about sex, about the different things happening at school with boys and girls, here was a mom who was completely taken aback. She said, I was shocked at that 5 minutes turning into 40 minutes. I had never imagined that my daughter would ever talk to me about these things because my mom never talked to me about these things. And I really, up to that point, had never even opened up a discussion about these things with my child.
Wow.
So things that come out of it are absolutely amazing. And for the little kids, and little kids are just they're so unscathed, they're unlayered, they're open, their heart space is just so open, right? The little kids always tell the moms, they remind the moms and dads, you're not being nice today, we need to take 5.
It's amazing, right?
Yes, it is.
Thinking we're doing something, and then they're getting back to us saying, hey, you.
Yes. and you're a much nicer mom when you take 5. Dragging their hand, pulling at their clothes. I want to take 5. I want to take 5. Let's take 5. It's time to take 5. So really the advantage in spending that time with our children is priceless. And we just don't make time for it. And if we really want to tap into our inner perfection and really tap into what that shared space feels like with our children, we need to roll up our sleeves and really know how to spend time with them to do nothing. Otherwise, you're not opening that door to communication fully.
I love that. That's the whole human being versus human doing, right?
Exactly.
It took me a while to get that, but it makes so much sense when you get that. It's like we are always on the go, do something. And just those 5 minutes, wow, I love that.
Well, our entire world is from what happens within, right? And if we don't know how to sit in quiet for 5 minutes and share space with people we love, then how do we connect from the within? Then all we're doing is the without, the doing, the going from task to task to task, from errand to errand to errand. How do we make that connection? Then we expect that through this crazy, I've got my child in every class and we don't have time, I don't have time, they don't have time, we don't have time, that in teenage years, they're going to come and talk to me, or they're going to share their first offer of weed, which is becoming more and more popular. They're going to share their first, first time that they were bullied, or the first time that somebody did something inappropriate to them. If we don't create that comfort now in the day-to-day, then how will they come knock on our door and say, I really have to tell you something?
Awesome. That's so powerful. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that tool with us, Roma. I really like that. Take 5. I'll have a link to that below the video. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
So moving on, our third sense is smell. And this is a tricky one, right?
This is a tricky one, yes.
But there is so much research out there that shows a very strong connection between smell and our limbic brain, the emotional brain, and memory, right? So in that sense, it is really important that we are aware and we engage the sense, right?
Yes, so if you think about it, right, when I walk into my mom's house and I smell, pineapple upside down cake that she made for me because she knows it's my favorite, what does that do? That triggers an emotion, right? You walk in the door and you smell and go, my mom made that for me, right? That triggers an emotion of love. That triggers an emotion of caring. That triggers a connection with my mom. She took the time to do this, right? And all through what? Through our sense of smell. So there's actually information that travels in that sense of smell to our brain, and it also triggers an emotion because you identify with the smell that this is my favorite upside down cake. And then, of course, there's an emotion attached to it that, wow, my mom took the time to make it. So yes, it's a complete engagement. And our smell also, our sense of smell is also our sense of perception, right? So you think about when you smell, you walk in the house and you smell something burning, or you smell a fire in a distance, immediately it activates your inner instincts like, your fight or flight gets activated. So our sense of smell is not just perfume, right? And how good this feels. Our sense of smell has so many different functions. And using this sense of perception with our children, using this actively is so important. Being perceptive. Now, think about, when you walk into a room, right? And you have a sense of disconnection with somebody, say a cousin that you fought with, or somebody is in the room. And you have the sense, you say, I could feel the fear in the air, right? Now you could sense the fear in the air. I could smell trouble. These
Right.
are things that, we use very subconsciously, but there's a lot of truth in this. So being able to harness this mindfully, harness this intentionally, then that becomes a great way to use our sense of perception. So, being perceptive, the kids are tired. Give you a simple day-to-day example. Child is tired. You can see that in their face. That's a sense of perception, right? So all these things that we have wired within our senses, within our perception, really help us make connections with our children, help us have that day-to-day, moment-to-moment empathy and compassion and alertness. And there's so many things that get triggered with our senses.
Awesome. And beyond just the sense of smell, breathing has always been acknowledged as such a powerful thing, right?
Yes.
Breathing in slowly in and out, that is a way to ground yourself, that is a way to calm yourself down. So from another perspective, as when you're looking at it from a non-verbal communication tool perspective, we can use the sense of smell as a reminder to ourselves to just breathe and calm down and center ourselves.
Exactly. So there's another great use of our nose, right? And I say in the book, our nose knows, right? And our nose is perceptive. So this sense of taking the breath is really a process of filtration. Now, when we breathe through our nose, we have the hair in our nose, and what do? They filter out, the dust, and they filter out the particles that are not supposed to be taken into our system. Similarly, taking the breath has the same function. So when you take that deep breath, you're actually calming your emotions down. You're filtering out your emotions. You're calming your brain down, your physical sense down. Everything drops a few notches. And if you repeat that breath, if you take it twice, 3 times, 4 times, you get calmer and calmer. So it actually filters your system and pumps you up, right? It really helps bring in that good energy and release that negative energy that you have with the height of the emotions. So, it's endless. We could talk about this forever on the advantages of breathing. And today we talk about meditating. We talk about pranayama, the whole process of breathing mindfully and what that does for our system. And using this knowledge in the day-to-day, in the moment-to-moment, when you have that moment of chaos with your children, taking that step back and taking a deep breath in before you respond to them. Activating that sense of perception, really saying, okay, what is my child talking about? Instead of reacting, it really takes you to a place of responding.
Mm-hmm. And we are modeling it to them, right? It's like instead of snapping, when we take that pause and, like, in a very clear, visible way, we start taking deep breaths. We are
Yes.
telling them, A, I'm ready to explode, and B, but I'm making an effort. I'm trying to calm down because I love you so much that I don't want to explode on you.
Sure, sure.
And more than any words, this can show them the importance of emotional regulation, right? So it becomes second nature to
How to
them.
emotionally regulate. And key word, you talk about pause, because everything is in the pause. All the intelligence is in that moment, in the pause, right? That pause can completely change your response to your child. And really, when we can shift that personal response to the child, then we're allaying, we're pushing off, we're actually bypassing the guilt, the doubt, the worry. Why did I say this to my child? I can't believe I said this. So you're bypassing that. You're learning how to work, not even through it, but you're actually learning to bypass it completely. So
Right.
taking that deep breath, it also models to the child, as you said, that when we pause, when we take that deep breath, even now my children are adults, and if they've said something and they've asked me a question straight up that I'm not willing to answer, I just take a deep breath and I just, okay, let me think about that for a second. Mom, why do you have to take deep breaths for everything? Because I need to process what you're saying. Obviously, you want a response from me, or do you want a reaction? Because how you said that was not nice, right? And I say it straight up that I'm trying to calm myself down. So it gives them that tool. And now, I mean, my children are adults and they're grown children. When they see me upset about something, they'll come and give me a big hug, and we do a heart to heart, and they'll say, "Let's take a deep breath together." And a lot of times, I don't want it. I'm just like, no, just give me a little space right now, right? But my son's 6'2", and my daughter's 5'7". They both tower on me, and they'll just hold me there, and we'll do a deep heart-to-heart breath, and we'll take that,
Oh.
and almost immediately you notice everything calming down. Everything, your entire emotional system, your limbic brain, completely, everything calms down. So there's so much power, so much intelligence in using that breath, that inhale through our nose.
So I like that you mentioned that. So let's focus on the part where you were talking about them giving you a deep hug, and that's a perfect segue to talk about touch, right? I mean, it's the deep breath when combined with this hug, with this physical touch, can have a double effect in helping us calm down. And it works both ways, right? When our kids are not calm, we can use the same thing the other way around, right? And I bet the reason your kids do this to you is because you taught it to them, right?
Right. Yes. And I think it's such an important, touch, of course, is, we know that, our skin is our largest organ. So you think about your first touch from your love, your first love. We can actually feel that touch all over our body, right? Or when we're upset at our children and we squeeze their arm, it's actually conveying a message. When we're upset and we're squeezing their arm, we're saying that I'm mad at you, right? Mm-hmm. Why did you do that? Or when they're upset and we're rubbing their back, we're saying, I'm here for you. So really using that consciously with children. And when you're upset at your children, when you are having a conversation about something, making sure, even if you're upset, keeping that hand on the back of your child, letting them know that, hey, I love you, but we need to talk about this. We have an issue. Let's discuss this. This is what happened in school. You cheated on your math test and your teachers called me. Instead of blowing steam on that, holding them, just a light touch while you're talking to them, even if you're upset at them, conveys that background message of, yes, I'm upset at you. Yes, you made a mistake. Yes, you did wrong, but I love you. Mm-hmm. So having that I love you right there, standing by the let's now try to figure this out, will really help harness that teaching moment and learning moment for children. Because what happens with children when they're upset, what's the first emotion that's triggered when they get caught, when they're in trouble, is fear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And in fear, our children shut down. So they're either going to run from it, and that's their fight or flight, that, my mom or my dad's going to scream at me, I'm in trouble, so I'm just going to run from this, meaning I'm going to either lie, or I'm going to make up a story, or I'm going to deny it, or I'm just going to completely shut down, and this is what they do then internally, right? They've completely shut down. They're not going to talk. They're not going to answer you. Okay, I don't know. Why did you do this? I don't know. And clearly they don't know, right? Because they made an impulsive decision. Helps when you use that touch, it helps open that doorway of communication with our children, letting them know, yes, you made a mistake, but I'm here for you. So let's talk about this.
I love that. I love that. And that was a huge aha moment for me while I was reading your book, because you talk about how it's easy for us to hug, kiss, show love when we are in a good mood. Like, the physical affection comes naturally when we are all in a good mood. But when we are angry, we usually don't do that. We usually tend to forget. We are like towering over them, or like, or we are, hands down, we are like withdrawing into ourselves. Yeah. But just that one arm on their shoulder, or just that one touch at their elbow, it's so grounding. It's saying that, like you mentioned, that it's, I might be upset with you, but I still love you. And it's a beautiful non-verbal communication tool right there.
And it's the truth, right? So
right.
Because this moment will pass, but our love for them won't.
Right.
Anger, this moment of disconnection will pass. So the whole idea is to use our senses to create moments of connection during disconnection. Right? We all know how nicely it feels when you walk into a room and you meet an old friend who makes that eye contact with you and gives you a hug and speaks to you sweetly. And, we all know what that feels like. But to actually use this consciously, mindfully, with full intention and awareness in a moment of disconnection really helps simplify things so much and creates that deeper bond with our children. And plus sends that message to the children that you are going to make mistakes. And this is part of life. I still love you through your mistake.
Right. And that takes us to the last sense, and taste. And here we are going to focus on the power of words. And it's the same thought that you mentioned out there that really connected with me. When we talk to our kids, when we are happy, we use all those endearments. We are like, sweetie, love, Janu, as you mentioned in your book. So we use all these endearments when we are happy with them. But when we are ticked off, chances are we are not using any of them. And that's where this nonverbal communication tool comes in, is to remember to use those endearments, right?
Of course. And our words leave a taste in our mouth, a good taste, bad taste, right? We talk about this. So these metaphors are actually true in the way of how we connect with our senses, how we communicate internally with ourselves and with each other. So, I always tell parents, sprinkle words of love, sprinkle words that taste good to you and to your child in these moments of disconnection. So even if you're upset, as you said, using those terms of endearment really helps keep that connection. And another thing that I like to remind parents is that when you're right, practice being kind first. Right? Because when we're right, what do? I did this, I told you, all of a sudden, we become the most unkind people, human beings, human to human, right? We become really unkind. And the truth is, this is the time that we need to be kind so that, again, we can harness the teaching moment so that we can build their core, their self-confidence, their self-esteem. Because when children make mistake, either you can let them fall flat on the floor, or you can help them get up faster, because if they fall flat on the floor and you leave them there, they're probably, just probably going to shut down for a while. So how can we then help pick them up in the moment and say, okay, well, this has happened, but I'm here for you. Let's do this together. It's, again, going back to using our senses and the words that we use. Yes, our nonverbal communication becomes the foundation, but imagine if we can match that up if we can align that, if we can synchronize that now with our verbal communication, if we can
Right.
make that eye contact and we can listen mindfully word for word for word, and we can be perceptive, and we can use that touch and then use words that are conducive to effective communication.
Awesome, awesome. And on the flip side, when I'm using these words of endearment, when I'm intentionally trying to use them, when I'm upset, it kind of signals to my brain that, this is a child you love. So then it becomes easier for me to be kinder, right?
If you notice when you're upset, and if you use the word sweetheart or honey, you're never going to say, sweetheart, I can't believe you did that. You're just not going to do that. If you use the word honey or love, your tone of voice has taken a calmer, it's turned down. The volume of the emotions has turned down. And that's the point, is to be able to have a dialogue with our children. And we can only come to this place of dialogue, communication, if we make this conscious effort to use our words mindfully, to use words that are conducive, that align with effective communication. And one of the big controversial things that I talk about in every single class is curse words. Because with parents, the young parents, the F word doesn't mean a thing. They're using F words at home with each other if they're upset with their partners. And they're also using these, when they're upset, because now it's become a habit, because you use it at work, you use it with your partner when you're upset. So for them to sneak up on you when you're having a conversation with the child is very normal. And that has a detrimental effect in connection, in communication. Think about it. If I'm really upset at you, and if we're having a dialogue and we're talking about it, the minute, even an argument or conversation, the minute I use the F word, there's a part of you that shuts down, that feels offended. That offense element comes in. And that doesn't change. I don't care how mainstream this has become, and yes, my children use it, your children use it, and they should know when to use it. And then what happens if they use it in school, or if they use it with a friend, or if they use it, in conversation and they get caught, they get into trouble. So really using our words mindfully, setting those examples is so important. And I talk about this as verbal hygiene. The importance of dental hygiene, we all know, so we follow everything that needs to be done, brush your teeth and floss your teeth and this and that. Why? Because you'll eventually end up with these troubles. Likewise, having verbal hygiene, using words that are conducive to human connection, really not looking at our kids in that authoritarian, because our words then take us to that authoritarian place with our children, knowing that, they are equal in existence as we are. That first indication comes from our tone of voice and the words that we use with our children.
I love that. I love that. Tone of voice. That's another thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about. Can you walk us through quickly through the tone?
Sure. And this would go back to that, that sweetheart, right? And how we talk to our children. The tone that we use, and in tone, sarcasm plays a big role. Right? Didn't I tell you? I told you, right? Being sarcastic with our kids, again, is condescending. It shuts them down. If you are to keep an open dialogue and keep our children emotionally open, now there are three elements, as I said, to communication: thoughts, feelings, and expressions, right? And now, if you want to access the intellect of a child, you have to be sure that you are managing your emotions so that their emotions are in check. That's the idea, to keep the emotions in check so that you can access their intellect. Because once the emotions, if we are to say, this is your intellect, here are your emotions, if the emotions are up here, you're not going to be able to get through to the child. And the whole point of that learning lesson, harnessing that teaching moment, is to be able to balance emotionally so that you can have an intellectual conversation and you can get deeper. Now you can get into what was the issue. Otherwise, if this is a tug of war, you're never going to get to communing, to coming together, to having that connection with your child, to finding out what the root cause of the problem was. Because a lot of times children say and do things impulsively, and we really need to dig deeper. But if we're battling emotions and we're battling arguments and having intellectually challenging conversations and emotionally blasting each other, we're not going to be able to get to Where did this start? What happened? How were you feeling? What triggered this? Who triggered what? So really important to know that our tone of voice is the first indication of that balance between our intellect and our emotions and the words we use. So the tone of voice really starts in the heart space, right? Once we understand that, and taking a breath can help manage that, that we need to come from the heart space when we communicate with our children, no matter what, no matter how angry we are. And in that, if you need to take a step back, take a step back. I used to tell my kids when they were little, and I was really upset all the time. Mom's really upset. I'm going to go to my room for 5 minutes. You can cry, you can be upset, you can do whatever you need to. Let me get myself together. I need to think about this for a minute, and I will be back. And following through in that 5 minutes, I would take that time to calm myself down. And as my kids got older, they would tell me, how about we just breathe together?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's breathe together. So it's once you start to do it yourself, they start to mirror that, our mirror neurons get activated. So really, circling back to that tone of voice, that's a very first indication of how you're going to communicate with your children on this conscious level, right? We've talked about the subconscious level with all the senses, because those are the quiet senses. That's the quiet language. That's the sensory language. But when we talk about this verbal language, bringing it into words, bringing that feeling into words. If you are managing your senses well and making that eye contact with the child and having that discussion and having your arm touching them somewhere, your hand somewhere, even if it's on their leg while you're talking to them or scolding them or trying to harness that teaching moment with them, if the words that we use, because that automatically will calm you down. Right? Now, if the words that you use, the tone of voice that you use is non-offensive, then you really invite them into the conversation.
I love that. I love that. I love how it all comes together to create this smooth, respectful communication, which is the foundation of a good relationship. And that's what we want at the end. I mean, we want these children to grow up to be awesome human beings, but we want them to be our kids, no matter how old they are, right? To stay.
You want that connection. You want to keep that connection. And Sumita, you really touched on a key word, which I'm talking about in my next book, respect. We expect that our children should respect us because I'm your parent. But really, respect is the language of love. Literally, it's two different sides of the same coin. One cannot live with the other. Respect is how love is expressed. Respect is how love is verbalized. Respect, otherwise you could say, I love you and beat the child, right?
Right.
Kids, but you don't respect them. Or you could tower over them. You could speak over them. You could be commanding. You could be demanding, but I love my child. So respect is that vehicle of expression, and being sensible is that one great way. And what I find absolutely amazing is we can synchronize our senses. How amazing is that? That we use all our senses together to have dialogue with our children. And once we tap into that, it becomes such a powerful tool of connection into the future with our children.
I love that. I love that. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I haven't seen very many people talking about bringing all 5 senses intentionally into our parenting experience, into our day-to-day parenting experience. And I am so glad we had this conversation, Roma. Thank you so much.
It's about the experience, right? Every single moment is defined by the experience that we're going to have with our children. And that experience is full when we use our senses to connect.
Awesome. So it's almost time for us to wind up. And before we go, I have one last thing.
Uh-huh.
So we are a community of action takers, and we can have all this knowledge filling up our brains, but if we don't turn that into action, if we don't do something about what we've learned, there really is no point. So every one of our speakers gets to issue a challenge to me and all our viewers, so we can try something at home today and see for ourselves the benefits of everything that we've heard here. So what is your challenge to me and the viewers?
So my challenge would be the most difficult of all five senses is the listening.
Mm-hmm.
So I challenge all of you, the next time that you have disconnect or chaos with your child, when they walked in upset, when they're talking to you about something, when they're telling their side of the story, even if you've witnessed, even if you've heard, even if you've seen with your own eyes that, the older child was the one that pushed the younger child first, practice that presence with them. Listen word for word for word. Let them complete their sentence before you say something. And if you have the urge to jump in, which we all do, that's human nature, use mm-hmm, okay, really. Even if you already know what the outcome is going to be, even if you've already seen the child, the culprit, if you will, even if you know the consequences that you're going to roll out, active listening, really mindful listening, conscious listening helps build connections with our children. So there's my challenge. And
I
then tell
love
us about it. Tell us what the challenge was, what you did. Tell us how hard it was for you. And do this at least 3 times. And, write down each experience, because you'll realize the progress that you'll make by the 3rd time. By the 2nd or the 3rd time, you'll realize it becomes easier and easier. You can also practice this with your spouse or a friend or a parent who's getting on your nerves, or a sibling or anybody, you could practice this anywhere, but give us an example or 3 different examples, 3 different times that you use it with your child, along with their age and what the incident was, and how you were able to calm yourself down, so that our community can find value in this and learn from each other's experience.
I love that. I love that. I should have known you're going to give us a hard challenge. But then again, it's a challenge that gives us so many benefits. So it's really worth trying. So everybody at home today, we are going to try and listen. Just
I have to tell you, Samita, it seems very hard in the beginning, maybe once or twice. By the 3rd time, you really realize it is so much easier than the chaos that we cause by participating in, by interrupting, by interjecting our children's dialogue. You'll realize that there's so much less chaos, and you'll do away with, you won't hear your children, as this becomes a habit, say to you, well, you never listen. You don't understand. You'll never get it. You'll see that becoming less and less, and that is so empowering. They'll turn to you more.
I so agree. Thank you so much, Roma.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
So everybody, remember I told you at the beginning of the talk that Roma has 5 different tools, and sensible parenting is just one of the 5 tools. And that's what we talked about today. So be sure to connect with her outside this conference. Check out her book, her website, her social media profiles. I'll have links for all of them below this video. So be sure to connect with her outside this conference, because there is just so much she can bring to our parenting. So be sure to take advantage of that. Thank you, Roma. I really
enjoyed having me, Sumita. And I really love the community that you have and what you're doing. So good job. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. This is it for today. This is it for now for this talk. I'll be back with another talk. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this talk, be sure to pass it on. I'm sure there are other parents out there who'll be going, aha, by listening to this. So be the person who takes this talk to them, okay? All right. Bye, Roma. Bye, everybody.